The mold, silent, invisible, inherited, is not merely clay shaped by society's hands, but the hardened cast of generations of forgotten selves. To break it is not rebellion for rebellion's sake. It is a sacred act of remembering who you truly are. Most live within the confines of what is expected, praised, and patterned, never suspecting that the very shape they inhabit is not of their own making. But there comes a time, if one listens closely, when the soul knocks, soft at first, then louder, asking to be seen beyond the image, beyond the roles, beyond the conditioning. The mask we wear is not chosen freely. It is often crafted slowly, unconsciously, layer by layer, in response to the world's demands. It begins in childhood, when we sense which parts of ourselves are loved, accepted, or shamed. We learn to smile when we are aching, to stay silent when we long to speak, to appear strong when we feel afraid. We become experts in adaptation, molding our expressions, beliefs, and even dreams to meet the expectations of others. The mask becomes second skin. It earns us approval, it helps us belong, and for a time it protects us. But what once shielded us eventually suffocates us. Beneath the surface, the soul stirs. It does not wish to perform, it longs to be. And this inner pressure begins to build, slowly cracking the smooth surface of our persona. We may resist it at first. We cling to the familiar image, terrified of what might emerge if we let go. The mask feels safe even if it is false. But the cost of keeping it on is the slow erosion of the self. The more we perform, the further we drift from our essence, until one day we look into the mirror and see only reflections of other people's desires staring back. The crack is often mistaken for a crisis. We call it burnout, identity loss, anxiety, or depression. But it is not a malfunction. It is a message. The self is knocking, asking to be felt, seen, and lived. When the mask begins to crack, it is an invitation, an opening into the deeper layers of who we are. This breaking is not destruction, but revelation. The fear we feel is not because something is wrong, but because something true is coming alive. To allow the mask to crack is an act of profound courage. It is to step into the unknown without guarantees, to dismantle the image we carefully constructed, and to risk being misunderstood. But it is also to begin again, not as a version of someone else, but as the person we were born to become. When the mask falls, we may feel exposed, raw, even fragile, but that vulnerability is sacred. It is the birthplace of authenticity. In shedding the mask, we do not lose ourselves. We meet ourselves, perhaps for the first time. Only when the false self crumbles can the real self rise, and that rising may not be loud or dramatic. It may be quiet, slow, and tender, but it is unmistakably real. To live without a mask is not to be perfect, but to be whole. It is to speak from the heart, to choose from the soul, and to move through life with the weightless strength of someone who no longer needs to pretend. The mask must crack, but what lies beneath is worth everything. The parts of ourselves we banish into the dark, our anger, our fear, our yearning for more, even our deepest longings for love and recognition, are not enemies to be conquered, but messengers to be welcomed. When we push these impulses away, declaring them unworthy or shameful, we give them dominion in the hidden recesses of the psyche. There they grow in secret power, driving our choices in ways we cannot see, until one day they erupt like a long-suppressed storm. Yet within those very elements we despise lies the path to our liberation. Each disowned fragment carries a gift, a seed of potential that, once acknowledged, blossoms into new strength. Our anger can fuel righteous action. Our fear can illuminate what we most need to protect. Our longing can point to the joys we've been too timid to pursue. To turn toward what we have rejected is to shine the light of awareness into the darkest corridors of our being. In that illumination, the shadows shrink, no longer wielding hidden control, and their energy flows back into the self as raw material for growth. Freedom comes not from eradicating these impulses, but from reclaiming them, embracing their wisdom, weaving their vitality into the tapestry of who we are, and discovering that the very aspects we once feared hold the keys to our fullest expression. The wound is not a mistake. It is not a detour from the path. It is the path. Pain, though often dreaded and resisted, is a sacred summons from the depths. It calls us out of surface living and into the raw terrain of the soul. When life wounds us, through betrayal, loss, abandonment, humiliation, failure, it strips away illusion. It dismantles the persona we so carefully crafted and forces us to confront what lies beneath. We may feel broken, undone, lost. But in that very breaking, something ancient stirs. Something deeper begins to speak. The wound humbles us. It interrupts the ego's certainty and opens us to the mystery. In our suffering, we are brought to the edge of ourselves, where control falters and pride dissolves. And in that vulnerable state, we become receptive to truths we could not access in comfort. Sorrow has a way of unsealing the heart. It brings us face to face with our mortality, our longing, our limitations. And through that confrontation, a doorway opens. This door does not lead us back to who we were. It leads us forward to who we are becoming, if we dare to remain present with the wound, rather than numbing it or fleeing from it. We discover that it begins to transform us. The pain becomes teacher, the scar becomes symbol, and we begin to carry our suffering not as a burden, but as a vessel for meaning. The very thing that shattered us becomes the thing that shapes us. Through the wound we gain empathy, depth, clarity, and the courage to live more honestly. We realize that transformation is not something we chase through effort. It is something that arises from surrender. To be transformed is to allow the pain to work through us, to dismantle the false, and to reassemble us in a more honest form. It is to become more whole, not in spite of the wound, but because of it. The wound softens what is rigid, it humbles what is arrogant, and it awakens what is asleep. Though we may curse it in our suffering, in time, if we listen, we come to bless it. For it showed us who we truly are, and led us through darkness into a truth that could only be earned through descent. The wound is the door, and if you have the courage to walk through it, you will not return the same. You will return more human, more real, more free. Individuation is not the pursuit of separation, but the sacred journey of becoming whole. It asks you to step away from the safety of imitation and the comfort of inherited identities, and to discover the thread of truth that runs uniquely through your soul. Most people live lives designed by others, by family expectations, cultural norms, religious scripts, societal roles. And while these may offer belonging, they often come at the cost of the self. Individuation begins the moment you ask, "Who am I beneath all this?" It is a quiet revolt, not against the world, but for the sake of your soul. This path is not paved. It winds through unfamiliar territory, marked by inner conflicts, doubts, and the haunting temptation to return to conformity. It demands that you face your contradictions and no longer divide your psyche into what is acceptable and what is forbidden. It calls you to confront both the golden parts of you that you've denied in false humility and the shadowed parts you've buried in shame. To walk this path is to listen deeply to the dreams, the symbols, the moods that rise from the unconscious. It is to follow the subtle signs that point toward what is authentic, even if it defies logic or approval. Individuation requires the bravery to be misunderstood. As you shed old layers, others may not recognize you. Some will question your choices, your silence, your growth. You may find yourself walking alone, stripped of titles, roles, and affirmations. But solitude, rather than emptiness, becomes sacred space, a crucible in which the self is forged. You learn to rely not on external validation, but on inner knowing. You begin to trust your own voice, even when it trembles. The brave do not seek to become superior. They seek to become real. Individuation is not about perfection, but about integration. It is the slow, often painful alchemy of gathering all that you are, light and dark, strong and soft, certain and questioning, and allowing it to coexist within a unified center. It is a return to your essence, not by adding more, but by peeling back everything that is not truly you. This journey is not linear. There are setbacks, spirals, regressions, but each return brings deeper clarity. Every encounter with the unknown adds a new facet to the self, and in time the fragments begin to form a pattern, one that is unmistakably your own. You no longer seek to fit into the mold because you realize you were never meant to. You were meant to embody something no one else can. Individuation is not the end of connection. It is the beginning of honest relationship. When you show up as your whole self, unmasked and grounded, you invite others to do the same. You no longer relate through roles or expectations, but through presence. And in this kind of presence, there is freedom. There is truth. There is peace. To walk the path of individuation is to live in alignment with your soul, regardless of the noise around you. It is not the easy road, but it is the only one that leads you home. Wholeness is not achieved by choosing one side over the other, but by holding the tension of both. We are taught to split ourselves, to be either strong or soft, logical or emotional, light or dark, good or bad. This duality is deeply ingrained in our culture, in our religions, in our families. We grow up believing that one part of us must dominate while the other must be repressed. And so, we fragment. We become half people, clinging to what is praised and rejecting what is feared. But the soul does not live in halves. It longs for totality. It longs for union. The parts we suppress do not disappear. They go underground into the unconscious, where they grow in power and influence. We become haunted by what we refuse to embrace, projecting it onto others, seeing our own disowned traits in the world around us. The warrior who disowns softness becomes brutal. The nurturer who disowns anger becomes resentful. The seeker who disowns doubt becomes arrogant. Every split creates imbalance, and every imbalance distorts who we truly are. To become whole is not to eradicate the opposites, but to recognize that they belong to one another. Strength needs tenderness to remain humane. Vulnerability needs boundaries to remain safe. Joy is made deeper by sorrow. Confidence is refined by humility. Every quality gains its truth through its opposite. The inner marriage between the poles is where wisdom is born, but this union does not come easily. It asks for inner confrontation. It requires you to sit with discomfort, to wrestle with contradictions, to feel the storm that rises when long, separated parts of you try to meet. It is a sacred chaos, an inner alchemy, and it cannot be rushed. You must allow anger and compassion to speak to each other. You must let fear and courage share the same breath. You must permit your darkness to stand beside your light, not as enemies, but as companions. In this process, the psyche becomes integrated. You stop fighting yourself. You stop needing to perform perfection. You begin to see that every part of you has a place, a purpose, a voice, and this acceptance breeds inner harmony. Not peace in the sense of stillness, but a dynamic equilibrium, a state of balance that is alive, flexible, and true. When you embrace your opposites, you also begin to embrace the opposites in others. Judgment dissolves into empathy. You see not just someone's actions, but the conflict beneath them. You understand that everyone is, in some way, wrestling with their own inner split. This brings compassion, depth, and authenticity to your relationships. Wholeness is not an image, it is a process, a continual unfolding of truth, a lifelong dance between light and dark, masculine and feminine, strength and surrender. It is not about fixing yourself, it is about welcoming yourself. And in that radical act of inclusion, you discover the greatest freedom, to be all that you are, without shame and without apology. You were never meant to be just one thing. You were always meant to be a living paradox, complex, multidimensional, complete. When you embrace that truth, you don't just become whole, you become real.